Greetings, everybody. It's Jim. When it comes to the micro games that I've got, of course, metagaming, task force games, SPI. I've got so many micro games to cover. I really almost didn't want to cover another company. However, it is kind of important because let's see how another company takes on the task. And there's a little bit of a completionist in me that would be like, oh boy, here's another company I might dive in and get everything of. However, this was definitely worth the plunge. What a great way to start it off with this company. I mean, this game has everything I like. It's going to have Sherwood Forest, the Sheriff of Nottingham, and of course, the main topic. Today, I'm going to be going over with you The Legend of Robin Hood by Operational Studies Group. So the Legend of Robin Hood is going to do something very rare, and that is appeal to both role players and war gamers. Role players because it's fantasy based enough, it's Robin Hood, of course, and it's got swords and shields and all that. But the thing is, if it was made in modern times with modern production costs and availability, this is easily two shades of way of shaving off the wargaming aspects of it, or the way they do rules and how they figure out combat and such, to being just a normal board game. And this was made in 1979, and it's still true to this day. It's easier to make a war game than it is any other game. All war games need is a map, some cardboard counters, flat cardboard counters, and a rule set. The player provides his own dice, and boom, you're off to the races. But even by modern standards, it's getting cheap to make your own games. It's getting a lot easier. So if this game was being remade, it definitely, with just a few adaptations, would just go on the shelf as a regular game. So let's get into looking at the map. The Legend of Robin Hood is a two-player game that takes up to 30 turns. Now, the Robin Hood player has 3 victory conditions that he must complete in order to win. The first is, of course, steal from the Sheriff of Nottingham's treasury. And he does it in 2 ways. One, along the red roads on the map, bishops and nobles will be traveling along it, and of course Robin Hood's going to try to thieve from them, try to rob them in the street. Okay? The second is in these castles here. Let me kind of move on up here. Basically, in the castles, there's keeps to every castle. And what the Robin Hood player can do is try to infiltrate them either directly or through a secret passage. But if he can get into the keep, he steals a few gold marks that way. Okay? So that's the 2 ways that Robin Hood can steal from the Sheriff of Nottingham. Now, the other 2 objectives he's got to do is 1, marry Maid Marian. All right? Of course, he's fighting for her before Sir Guy can marry her. And of course, if Sir Guy marries her, that makes things much more complicated. And the third part of it is simply just to get the King Richard when he appears on the board before the sheriff does. And, maybe a fight will ensue or whatever. But basically, he's got to land in the same area as King Richard and be the only one in that space at the end of the turn. He's got 30 turns to do it. And of course, the Sheriff of Nottingham is trying to prevent Robin Hood from reaching any of these goals. Now, I'm not sure if Operational Studies Group did this on purpose or not, but it was pretty much a really interesting twist. They actually list the victory conditions different. They say you have to marry Maid Marian first, get into King Richard's area with Robin Hood to end the game, and getting the treasury last. All right, making an emphasis that the treasury is the important part, but it's not. It's actually just the randomizer. So what do I mean by that? In a lot of war games, what happens is the war games already have everybody in a set position, but they don't want to get into this thing where you're always going to do the same thing every game, right? You're going to say, okay, the proper move is to do this and this and this, because if you set up the same way, you're going to have the same process. So what do? Usually, for the first turn or only 2 of the game, they'll have some kind of random thing happen that both players got to react to. moves the guys around a little bit differently. To react to that, they have to take care of it, and then they move on to the real game. Well, that's the same thing here, only this happens for 15 turns. If you look at the turn chart, you'll see that Maid Marian doesn't show up until turn 15. All right, so the first half of the game, and Robin Hood does have to do quite a few things, is just to go around the board, robbing nobles, and possibly going into the keep, because all that's random. The nobles are going to happen at different parts of the board. Robin's going to has to recruit all the merry men himself and the leaders such as Little John and Friar Tuck along the way. But the thing is, they can do it very easily. Robin Hood's not going to have really a tough time. The Sheriff of Nottingham's job is really just to keep Robin Hood player honest. Okay, just can't sit on his butt and let him do it, but because he's got to kind of whittle him away a little bit. But the thing is, the Robin Hood player will be able to do so. His guys are much more agile and maneuverable on this map. The map is very easy, by the way. Not everybody, but everybody gets movement points, whether it's like 3 to 5 is the norm, with all of pretty much Robin Hood's units being 5s practically, outnumbering the Sheriff of Nottingham's usually by 2. And the movement points are 1 for everything except for the forest areas, which are 2. So as you can see with just that, they can move around very fluently. So the Sheriff of Nottingham really can't stop him. Now, when we look at the counter sheet here, we can say a very important aspect of this game is there are very few units. And with the exception of a few of the leaders, the Sheriff of Nottingham's in red and Robin Hood's in white, once they're gone, they're gone. Now, as far as the units go, of course, the Merry Men are in green. They recycle. If they get defeated, they go back on the board at certain random spots you roll for. But Robin Hood has to go over there, send a leader over to recruit them all over again, taking time. And this could be lucky if they're close, but they could end up all the way across the map. For the sheriff's pikemen, which are the ones that are the first ones in blue there, they do show up after they're defeated. They will show up to 4 turns, maybe more if they're maybe more if there's already some ready to go, because they only get 1 a turn, 1 new unit a turn. They will come back. But the King's Foresters and the Knights, the last 2 units on the blue units on the bottom of the blue section there, once the Sheriff of Nottingham loses those, they're gone. And there is definitely a duality in styles here, where the Sheriff of Nottingham's forces are great inside of the castles and the keeps, but the Merry Men have it down pat when it comes to being outside, because they can use their archery and they will just whittle away anybody else, while, of course, the King Foresters are the only units for the Sheriff of Nottingham. So out in the field, it's the Robin Hood player. Inside the castles and the keeps, it's great for the Sheriff of Nottingham. And since this game appeals to role players, war gamers, and casual gamers alike, just to let you know, Julius Caesar is about to hit our doorstep in about 2 weeks here. So definitely get this top 50 war game. It's the game that I say that it tricks war gamers to play a Euro game, and it tricks Euro players to play a war game. You don't have to be a war player to appreciate the game or play it, but yet it is still one of the top 50 war games of all time on Board Game Geek. And the next Harn World book for you role players out there has been decided. It's going to be the Kingdom of Candé. Many of our editors and writers actually would say that this is the book you should go to when you're just starting out with Harn World. Normally, traditionally, we have done the Kingdom of Caldor, but they are suggesting Candé, a lot of them. So this would definitely be something to wet your whistle there. And of course, finally, soon thereafter, Pigskin, which is in prototype production right now, will be available on Kickstarter shortly thereafter, the game of Football Mayhem. So one of the things I like about the game is it moves at a very rapid pace, which is great for teaching new people how to play and making them feel confident, because all the Robin Hood player has to do right away is just move around the board and start recruiting people. And moving around is easy enough on this game. But then it's just a matter of where do you want to recruit and who do you want to recruit. Are there nobles coming into the board on the left or the right? Those kind of decisions. If Robin Hood ends his turn on any merry man, which is face down, like right here and right here, they're all over the map. They are automatically recruited. So are most leaders, with the exception of Will Scarlet, Little John, and Friar Tuck, as you can see by the chart right here. He does have to go through a little bit of a process to prove their worth to him, and sometimes they'll be recruited for the most part, but there's like a 33% chance they won't be recruited. And actually, it might actually be that Robin Hood might even get wounded in the process, and if he is wounded and the Sheriff of Nottingham's close by, Sheriff of Nottingham might smell blood and go after the kill right away and win the game. No Robin Hood, no game. Okay. Now I should say that there's two ways that characters can die in this in the Sheriff of Nottingham's or anybody's hands. First is battle. Okay, that's obvious. But if they get captured, which could happen to either player, you could choose to just murder them outright. The Robin Hood player can choose to do that, or you can hold them for ransom. All right, and then that's another way for them to get money if the Robin Hood player is having a hard time. The Sheriff of Nottingham has to go through more of a process, though. He has to take any leader after the battle that doesn't die and surrenders, and they have to go through a process, take them to a castle, and then he can have them hung. Now, I should mention that eliminating the opposing leaders is pretty important, especially Robin Hood eliminating the sheriff's men, because there's only 4 leaders there. Okay. Now, of course, the Sheriff of Nottingham wants to hang Robin Hood because that ends the game, but that's also not necessarily true, which I'll get into a little bit. There's more that can be done to end the game that they don't say in the rules. But anyway, the thing is, it's more straight. It's not as straightforward as just getting into combat. All right. Every leader has maybe a chance to escape after combat, or they may just be captured. Now, if they don't die in battle, which is also another possibility, and they are captured instead because they don't escape, what happens is the Robin Hood player can choose 2 simple things. One, they can just straight up murder them. That's fine. They can do that. Or they can hold him by ransom if, like, for some reason, maybe the sheriff's doing a real good job, or the Robin Hood's merry men's just getting unlucky, not getting enough nobles and getting into the keeps for the treasury. He can hold them up for ransom, and then they just come back on the board the next turn at any village. While the Sheriff of Nottingham has to go through more of a process if he's not lucky enough to kill them in battle. If he can't kill them in battle and they don't escape and he captures them, well, it's a road to the end, but he's not there yet. Him and another unit have to escort. They got to follow by the rules, even though he definitely doesn't want to. He has to take them to a castle, has to put them on trial for a turn, then he can have them hung legally, okay? Because he's in front of his men. He's got to make sure that he's following the rules if they surrender in front of him. So, and all the while, that allows the Robin Hood player maybe to just go off, because that allocates resources, because he has to have enough there to do the job for hanging them, but he also has to make sure that while they're sending them off to a castle, because they got to move to a castle, and they can be rescued by the merry men in Robin Hood's units along the way, or even in the castle itself. So he's got to make sure he allocates enough to get the job done, which makes it easier for Robin Hood to do his thing. So pretty interesting. But there's even more important things the Sheriff of Nottingham player does when it comes to eliminating units. One of the things that they don't mention in the rules is when, again, Maid Marian has to get married to Robin Hood before the end of the game, right? Well, the thing is, if Robin Hood's dead, there's no marriage. Okay, Maid Marian can't be killed at all. She can be captured, but never killed. However, there's two other pieces that have to be present to get married. Robin Hood, Maid Marian, Elena Dale, and little Friar Tuck all have to be in the same area for a turn. Okay? All right, simple enough. Well, no Robin Hood, as we said, no game. The game's over. Maid Marian can't die, but I found out because Friar Tuck died early in battle in the game. He doesn't say, but no Friar Tuck, no marriage. No Elena Dale, no marriage. No marriage, no winning of the game. So that was an aha moment that was like kind of funny. And I wonder, I would think that would have to be in the rules too before you play a game and then didn't realize, oh, you can't get married, the game's over. Oh, So I don't know if Operational Studies Group left that out as an aha moment. Part of me wonders if that should have been mentioned somewhere because there was room to do so. But either way, I just thought that was interesting because that is what happened in my game. But I played it out as if Friar Tuck didn't die. I just wanted to see what the rest of the game played out like. And it still was interesting because now we would have to deal with Prince John and King Richard getting on the field. So combat's really simple, which makes it great for new players, of course, but yet there's nuances to how things play out here. The first thing you do is you tally up all the strength points for archery from your combat units. And combat units are really the only units that matter here, whether they're blue or green. The leaders don't matter except for one case. If you have a leader on your side and the opposition does not, all your units, whether you're in the archery table or the melee table, get +1 to their roll. Simple enough, okay? So anyway, it starts with archery. Depending on the archery strength, how points you have in total amongst everybody in that area, you roll on the chart, and that's how many. The result is how many units are eliminated on the other side. The other side does get to fire back before they go. You're pretty much doing simultaneous combat. Simple enough. Obviously, the Merry Men have a large advantage here. All their units, every Merry Man has a strength of 2 when it comes to archery. Only the King's Foresters for the Sheriff of Nottingham have a strength of 1, and you don't have too many Foresters, so you're really it's really going for the Merry Men here. So after archery comes melee. It's a simple odds ratio. Since the numbers are so small in the game, it rarely goes past 2 to 1. It's not very complicated whatsoever. The most that you can lose is 3 units. The attacker, in an extreme case, can lose 3, but for the most part, it's only 1 or 2 units. So that's another strategy to think about when you're going around in a stack, if you can, is to make sure you have probably 3 units there, and you'll never have to worry about your personalities being captured. There'll always be enough that if you have a bad stroke of luck, that on your next turn you can leave, because that's what's 1 round of combat and it's over. Okay, now if for some reason both sides have no units left, then it comes to personal combat. Like I said, it's very rare. Then you go on a melee table on that and find out who's captured and who's killed and stuff like that. But for the most part, there'll be your units left, and the personalities will be just left standing, and that's when you roll to see if they got killed in combat or if they surrender or escape. It's as simple as that. You rarely get to the personal combat side of things. It's very easy peasy. And the thing is, when you lose units, another thing that's interesting is the person who owns units always chooses which units go. Now, why is that important? Let's look at the units again. See if I can get this up here. Okay, and so when we look at the units again, the king. You look at the blue units up there, the King Foresters and the Knights at the bottom. There's only 5 of those, and once they're gone, they're gone. And the King Foresters are the only archers that the Sheriff of Nottingham has. Now, when it comes to the Merry Men, again, they repopulate, and so do the pikemen, for that matter. But it's going to be a number of turns before they come back. Okay, but if you definitely want, especially if you're the Sheriff of Nottingham player, and you want to keep those knights in play, oh man, you better bring some pikemen with you, or you're going to have a very important piece eliminated. As chaotic as this game can seem to be at times, there's definitely an order to things. The first half of the game is really focused on Robin Hood stealing from the treasury of the sheriff. And then right after that is the second act where you're going to try to marry Maid Marian and keep Sir Guy from marrying her. And then the third act is all about getting ready for King Richard to appear. And all the while, the first act never really ends. It keeps on going throughout. And even if you do marry Maid Marian, you still got to keep her safe. It can get nuts. And I really appreciate the overlapping story arcs, and your story for your game is always going to be special, and I would say memorable. Everybody should try to get their hands on playing this game. Find somebody who has it, play it. Thumbs up all the way. I'll see you guys next video.